SABC News presentation.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Interface here on SABC2. My name is Tembisa Magele. Well, more than 1,000 South Africans are languishing in jail abroad on drug-related crimes. Unable to contact their families and South African authorities, they live a life of misery and deprivation. Now, Locked Up, a South African NGO working with some of the prisoners and their families, say South Africa has no prisoner exchange agreements with other countries, making it difficult for convicts to be sent home. Human rights lawyers say this is a violation of prisoners' rights. Let's take a quick look at this insert.
More than 1,000 South African citizens are jailed abroad on drug-related crimes. Many of these are forced into the drug trade. According to Locked Up, a South African organization that helps locals arrested abroad, drug cartels continue to recruit decoys into the hands of authorities in foreign countries to enable their drug mules to escape arrest. Germa Mego's son Wessel is serving a long sentence in a Hong Kong jail.
He made a phone call to tell us about his arrest, and then he couldn't phone us further on because then the embassy told him that they can't help him to get a phone card because they haven't got the finances.
The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime 2010 report says South Africa is the regional hub for drug trafficking and the largest transit zone for illicit drugs in the Southern Africa. But authorities say they are working hard to deal with the drug cartels.
We do have most of the drugs manufactured locally. We do have a little bit of drugs which are being smuggled to our country. We have a team within the Hawks focused on drugs. You can call it another face of the Narcotics Bureau. And our successes in the recent past has proven that our team are doing very well.
Actually, there is no investigations happening in South Africa because the government doesn't want it. So I feel, isn't there some more people higher up that are involved in this drug dealings than we know?
South Africa has one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, but its citizens languish in prisons abroad.
I would like to see that he can come back and make statements that there can be investigations in South Africa to help our people, because more and more people get involved in this and some of them are really real innocent.
Since 2008, a total of 13 South African children whose parents are jailed abroad have been repatriated back to South Africa by the Department of Social Development. There are no efforts to repatriate adults who commit crimes in foreign countries.
In as much as it is our business to fight crime, we would not allow our citizens to go and commit crime in another country. Our business is to fight against crime, and those that are involved in criminal activity must be faced with the might side of the law.
South Africa has no prisoner transfer treaty with other countries. It's one of the only 3 countries worldwide which doesn't have such an agreement. Section 30 of the Correctional Services Act gives government the power to enter into these agreements to accept South Africans imprisoned in foreign countries. The NGO Locked Up has lost a High Court case in which they tried to force government to enter into these treaties. However, all is not lost. The case has been referred to the Constitutional Court. Zama Buthelezi for Interface at SABC.
Well, joining us now for this discussion from our Seapoint studios is Claire Ballard, who is an attorney and also the head of the Penal Reform Program at Lawyers for Human Rights. And in the studio, we are joined by Belinda West, who is the director of Locked Up. Thank you very much to both of you and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Belinda, this is the general sentiment of most South Africans, and I'm sure other people elsewhere in the world feel the same. If you do the crime, do the time.
Yes.
What is wrong with our sentiment?
That is absolutely correct. If you do the crime, do the time. We are calling for the prisoner transfer agreement not to set these people free, but to repatriate them back to home soil where they can serve their sentences on home soil, amongst their culture, amongst their language, and of course where they can get family visitation, which facilitates the rehabilitation process.
Okay. Before we talk about the rehabilitation side of it, let's talk about what it is we are dealing with, because we lump it all together. We say drug-related crimes, but there are drug mules that we hear about. There are drug decoys that we hear about. Please differentiate the two for us.
Correct. I think it's important, first of all, to explain what kind of drugs are trafficked. You know, drugs, the term drugs is very broad. You get drugs that can grow in your garden. Marijuana grows like a weed. But the drugs that are primarily trafficked across international borders are cocaine, heroin, and periodically hashish, but mainly cocaine. That is the main sort of drug. So they are trafficked, and yes, it is a crime, it's a criminal offence. When a person gets arrested in a foreign country, they then need to serve a sentence there. However, the consensus with our constitution is that when a person commits a crime in a foreign country, they must go under the laws of that country. But actually, the crime is not committed in a foreign country. It is committed here because these people are recruited here.
No, but they are caught elsewhere.
They are caught elsewhere, but the crime originates here. They are recruited here by the syndicates. For every South African that is locked up in a foreign country, there is a recruiter and a syndicate on the ground in our country who is finding them, either lying to them. Some of these people are innocent, some do it knowingly. Yes, we agree with that. But the actual crime, the origination of the crime,
is in South Africa. Okay, I'd like us to talk a little bit more about what actually goes into the recruitment of these mostly young people. But let's bring Claire into this discussion. Claire, you say that this is an infringement on the human rights of these prisoners. But once again, let me pose the question that I posed to Belinda. If these people are breaking the law, whether willingly or not, but they are caught with drugs, shouldn't they just serve their sentences where they are?
I'd like to firstly correct your sentiment. I don't think it's an infringement on the human rights, simply because they don't. The Bill of Rights, the South African Bill of Rights, does not apply outside our borders. That does not mean, however, that South African citizens that are detained abroad don't have the right to be considered for diplomatic protection by our consulates and embassies. So
what is your sentiment then? What should be done? Once they are caught, why shouldn't they serve their time there?
In certain circumstances, they should. But I think one thing that we need to realize is that states that are dealing with a high rate of drug importation and exportation have, typically these countries are in the East, Middle East, and various countries in South America. Many of these countries have established incredibly harsh penal regimes to deal with drug offenders of this type. That means they're imposing extremely harsh sentences, often without the option of parole. That is something a South African court simply would not do. We just don't have that type of penal system within our borders. That means we have our own citizens serving long periods of time abroad without the assistance of their communities, families, and friends.
On the flip side, though, Claire,
to the extent that our own consulates and embassies frustrate the process of them being able to contact home, facilitate communication, advocate for humane conditions of detention in these countries, that is a certain breach of their rights, yes.
All right, we do have a lag in the line to Cape Town, so we might have a little bit of a delay in the responses that we're getting from Claire. And we're going to have to take a short break. We're back after this break, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the responsibility of the South African government. Just stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Interface, and as I'm sure you've heard at some point in your life, you've heard about drug mules and drug decoys, and it's all a very murky world that many of us don't understand. And so when we hear that a South African has been detained elsewhere in the world for drug-related charges, we all just back off and say, oh, well, they did the crime, they should do the time. But there's a whole lot more to that, and that's what we're talking about tonight. And Belinda is with Locked Up. It's an NGO that looks at the rights of those prisoners that are detained on drug-related charges abroad. Belinda, the whole idea of having a drug mule and a drug decoy, can you just go back to explaining that for us? Because in my thinking, if we are possibly on the same flight, I'm the mule, you're the decoy, surely the authorities should have capacity to apprehend both of us. Surely they should be able to detect the drugs on both of us. So how does it work? Why would you need a decoy?
Okay, the drug mules, the syndicates have their regular runners, and they are generally the drug mule, and they will carry quite large quantities of contraband across borders. Now, at every point of authority, be it an airport or a port or something, you have security, you have authorities, and they need to sacrifice someone at each one of those points so that the drug mule can get through. Now, the operation of syndicates is an extreme network across the world. This is not a South African problem. This goes global. So people are paid off along the route.
Okay.
There's a tremendous network that operates in the transportation of something like this. So if I'm the decoy and you are the mule, you'll be carrying a much larger quantity, probably 30 kilograms or more. I might be carrying 2 or 3, as we had recently, in this case, a lady arrested in Kenya. She had a few kilograms of cocaine. The result is the same, but in addition to that, as the decoy is unaware of the drug mule or other decoys or other mules that might be on the same flight. That person believes that they're doing the job properly. They've been told by whoever is sending them that everything is paid for, you'll get through, no problem. Meanwhile, they have been deliberately set up, and most occasions when an arrest happens with one of our citizens, the authorities have been tipped off. And it's the syndicate that has sent them that has tipped off the authorities, because they need to create a diversion.
Okay.
And that is the decoy.
So when we look at the reason why people do this, I mean, we've heard all sorts of varying reasons that, you know, people are promised jobs, people think that there are better opportunities or a quick way to make money once they take a few kilograms of cocaine or whatever it is to a different country. But how does it actually work? How does the recruitment of this work? Because I read somewhere that these recruiters of decoys particularly get paid between 7,000 and 10,000 rand.
Yeah, they get paid about 7,000 rand for every person they recruit, and recruitment can happen anywhere. It can happen in a sports club, it can happen in university, it can happen in the workplace. Particularly vulnerable people, often women who have children to support, they get offered 20,000 rand, 30,000 rand. That's quite a lot of money to many people, especially if you have young children. And they say, all right, well, if I'm going to do this and get paid this kind of money, it'll benefit me. I've been assured that everyone has been paid off en route and I will get through. Other times they are offered jobs. It's a complete lie. We have a woman sitting in, I think it's China. She was offered a job as an ambulance driver, and she went off to the east, and suddenly she said, no, you're going to take drugs for us, and bang, she was arrested. We have Nalo Bobala Nobanda, who's serving a 15-year sentence in Thailand, very harsh conditions there, and she was coerced by her best friend. Her school friend, long-time family friend, said, we're going to Brazil to start importing hair products into South Africa. Start this business with me. They arrive in Brazil, and she is forced to swallow drugs, which she couldn't, and hence that is why they wrapped them up in false dreadlocks to get her through. So people are absolutely coerced into a lot of this. There are a lot of innocent people here.
All right. Now, Claire, the prisoner transfer issue, what about the overcrowding when it comes to our South African jails? Because some would say, if you're going to now ask for 1,300, that's the number that we have officially, of those that are serving sentences outside of this country to come back to South Africa, we are only going to exacerbate the problem of overcrowding in South Africa.
Our correctional centres are not overcrowded, particularly when it comes to our sentenced facilities. The overwhelming state of overcrowding occurs in your remand detention facilities, not in the sentenced ones. So on all accounts, that isn't a real concern. There isn't a particularly good, reasonable, or coherent argument why South African citizens detained abroad should not be repatriated into centres in South Africa that can accommodate them.
So what argument are the police and the authorities advancing then for not doing that?
I haven't heard an argument, to be honest. The most I've heard is that it is a political function, a diplomatic agreement between two countries that is made. So my understanding of it is that there is simply a lack of political will or motivation to repatriate. One thing we do know is that it is expensive to accommodate sentenced detainees. Our correctional centres take an enormous amount of our budget. Perhaps that is an argument. I don't think it is one that has been advanced by our government, but certainly maybe that reason might be at the forefront of their minds.
And in fact, one of the gentlemen that was interviewed in the package that we listened to earlier was talking about how, each country has got its own laws and does its own thing. So once you're caught in a different country, the South African government cannot get involved. But let's look into that right after we take another short break. Remember that if you would like to take part in this discussion, you can always do so on social media. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the whole issue of South Africans being detained abroad on drug-related charges, and we're in conversation with Claire Ballard, who is an attorney at Lawyers for Human Rights, and Belinda West, who's a director of Locked Up. And remember that if you would like to also take part in this discussion, you can do so. Facebook at Interface on SABC2, or on Twitter at Interface on SABC, or at Tembisa Magele. Now, Claire, just getting back to the capacity then of the police to be able to investigate some of these cases. That's one of the things that the parent that was featured in our piece earlier said, and I know that Belinda shares the same sentiment, that the South African police should get involved in investigating some of these cases abroad. But do we have that kind of capacity?
I don't think I have any inside information on priority crimes and the SAPS's capacity to investigate. But I do believe that there is an overwhelmingly similar story that is told by the drug mules or drug decoys that are South African citizens detained abroad. And that is that they are recruited by very powerful drug syndicates that have large monopolies all over the world. That means that there is powerful evidence and very credible evidence that these our own citizens that are detained abroad are able to offer. Such evidence can be used in the prosecution of drug cartel leaders that live in South Africa. I don't think there's a good reason not to gather that evidence. Evidence gathering is something that can be fairly easily facilitated through mutual agreements between the states, with the cooperation of embassies and consulates based in the countries that typically detain these kinds of offenders.
Do we know if, when the South African police get that information, they're able to at least follow up on, the recruiters and the syndicates back here at home and try and apprehend them?
There's no reason why they wouldn't be able to. Such evidence, if such evidence is reliable and credible, there is no reason to follow up on that. I don't know of instances where they have or where they haven't. That kind of information isn't readily available in the public domain. But we do know that big drug busts occur when there has been evidence gathered that is reliable, powerful, and credible, and often it comes from people that have been involved in that crime. That is certainly something we know for sure.
Are the police doing that, Belinda? Do they at least, when they don't investigate the crimes, when they get the information, do they at least use that to try and apprehend those that have started this whole thing here in South Africa?
Not to our knowledge and our experience. Many of the families that we deal with have opened cases. The first step when somebody disappears is to open a missing persons case. And as soon as there's information coming, perhaps through DIRCO, the Department of International Relations, the police step back and say, drug-related charges, arrested, detained in another country, hands off. There has been investigation of the Tessa Beertger case, which resulted in arrest and conviction of Cheryl Chwele and Frank Nobelisa. That is the only case that has been investigated. Every parent, every family will report that there is no effort from the South African police in these cases.
When it comes to the work that is done by the authorities, what are your expectations? Because like the gentleman in our piece said, you know, there are so many of these South Africans that are getting caught up in these in the drug trafficking, or human trafficking as you called it earlier, but they know that they're not supposed to be doing this, and yet they still do it. What are your expectations on the part of the authorities?
Well, as I said before, some people do know what they are doing. A lot are duped into thinking they're doing something completely different. Just from a humanitarian point of view, they are South African citizens. They have a birthright to this country, and as a South African citizen, I would expect that my country would offer me some kind of guidance, protection, the repatriation of these people, 1,000 people back into our prison system here. We need to look at how many foreigners we are jailing in our country. In the absence of a prisoner transfer agreement, foreign nationals who are jailed here and convicted here are a burden on us, the taxpayers. And that number far exceeds the 1,000 South African citizens jailed in foreign countries.
Where to from here then, Claire? I mean, what can be done to try and get even that prisoner exchange program that Belinda's talking about, to get it going and to actually see some headway in this matter?
Belinda is correct. There are powerful humanitarian reasons why we should implement prisoner transfer or prisoner repatriation agreements. Like I said, it is a diplomatic and political function, but that doesn't mean we cannot lobby Parliament and the governments to enforce such changes. Regrettably, a lot of South African citizens detained abroad are often forgotten about, simply because they do not have access to readily available means of communication. And I think perhaps that's a poorer reflection on the consulates and embassies there. And we've heard time and time again criticism on the part of such embassies for failing to facilitate this kind of communication. And given what our Constitutional Court has said about diplomatic protection, it must be done. It's not simply a government function and thus something we cannot control. It must be done reasonably for a rational purpose, or connected to a rational purpose, and it must be done in good faith. And to the extent that they fail in that, that is certainly a breach of their rights. And perhaps the more we publicise that, the more we remind governments about their obligations and duties, not only in our own law, but in international customary law as well, perhaps the more headway we can take, the government will make in establishing such agreements or treaties.
Belinda, final thoughts from you? For those of us who may still think, you know what, keep them in those prisons because it acts as a deterrent to those who might want to get involved. I know that you said some are tricked into getting involved in this. So if it smells like it's too good to be true, then it probably is. Those that say that this should act as a deterrent, what do you say to them?
I don't know that it really acts as a deterrent. The Locked Up organisation was started in 2008. We've been running since then, and the arrests are still carrying on. We find that the real deterrent comes in publicity, such as programs like this. We gain a lot of ground and a lot of new memberships and people taking interest when they see a show like this, and they are mature enough to understand the differences between a drug mule, a drug decoy. They're also mature enough to understand that some of these people are coerced into this, that other people are desperate.
Just very quickly, the do's and the don'ts? You know, don't accept packages from people that you don't know.
Obviously,
or what?
yes. I think
Yeah,
every
what are
traveller
some of
knows
those?
that don't wrap your bags when you're going to travel. But generally, if somebody says, hey, let's go and do this great thing, do a lot of homework before you get involved. Find out who you're going to be meeting on the other side. Because once you land in a country like that, if you wrapped up in a drug syndicate, they take away your passport and you are at the mercy of them until they release you.
So it is human trafficking.
It
in
is
essence.
definitely human trafficking. These people are used as human suitcases, and it falls under the Act of Human Trafficking in South Africa.
Don't take any jobs abroad. Is another
Absolutely.
one. Unless it is legitimate.
Unless you
and you've
really
checked
know,
it
unless
out.
you've done some really proper homework.
Oh, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for
Thank
that.
you.
As we head into the festive season, and a lot of offers might be coming to people that are watching, I hope that this has been very useful information for them. Thank you very much to Claire, who is in our Cape Town studios. Thank you for joining us for this program. And also thanks to you for making the time to join us for Interface. To join us again next week at the same time, from me, Tembisa Makhaile, and the team. Good night.